Tales of Iron may be the most adorable Souls-like I have ever played. Like something out of a storybook, Tales of Iron presents a lush watercolor world intertwined with brutal and unforgiving gameplay, and a protagonist that you just want to pat on the head and say, "Good boy." Imagine a story you can read to a child with gameplay that takes a firm position on the list of must-play Souls-like games. So go ahead and sit back, relax, and let me tell you about this game called Tales of Iron. In Tales of Iron, you play as Reggie, who can I just say is like the cutest name ever for a rat. I mean, come on. Reggie, he's a prince, and he's next in line to be king. He attends his ceremony where he then proves that he's the rightful heir to the kingdom, and all hell breaks loose. The frogs invade, destroy the city, and now it's up to Reggie to rebuild and save his friends and family. In the first third of the game, I would say that the story and the pacing in terms of progression is pretty linear. However, about midway through the game, side missions become a little bit more required in order to rebuild the kingdom and bring praise to Reggie. Reggie earns his place as king. And when he does these extra side missions and these extra things for his people or his rats, right, he builds a rapport with them, and you get to see that come to life as you play. Seeing the towns and the NPCs rebuild their lives around Reggie's accomplishments was satisfying and just flat out adorable to witness. The way the characters communicate the requests and burdens to Reggie is very cute as well. The tutorials, all dialogue between the characters, it's all in bubbles with little pictures of what you need to do, and it's really easy to understand. All of this cuteness, however, can be quite deceiving, as gameplay and combat show this world can be brutal and unforgiving. Let's talk about this combat. As you would expect, you have aspects of combat that give Tales of Iron its quote-unquote Rat Souls identity. You have your dodge, you have your block, your parry, your light attack, heavy attack, and also abilities that expand the combat and make it intuitive. Ranged attacks, for example, using the bow and the crossbow, require little to no aiming, which feels right. The combat is so fluid, and with the right diagnosis, you can pick these enemies apart. Much like any Souls game, you have to learn the patterns, you have to learn the visual cues of enemies and bosses, and there's plenty of them in this game. For example, when the enemy has a red visual cue, that means you have to dodge through it. You miss that, you get in trouble. It's very punishing if you do not obey the visual cues. It takes a matter of trial and error, of course, but once you learn what the cues are and how to execute your moves to combat their moves, it can make for some really good flowing combat. And can I just give some kudos to the developers for making parrying so satisfying in this game? And on top of that, having a big window to get these parries down is something I can always appreciate. So thank you for that. There's platforming in this game as far as navigating, but most if not all battles are handled on the ground. Some of the bosses, and especially some of these mini bosses, gave me a bit of trouble. But the quality of life in this game excels and helped eliminate most stress. Checkpoints are very fair. And not only that, but next to many of them are liquid jugs that you can use to refill your health flasks. There's also arrow refills and also your supply box that you can get into in case you want to change your armor or your weapons. All weapons and armor have stats and weight, and your power as far as how much damage you put and how much damage you take is defined by these. As for enemy types and areas, there's a good amount of those to give it variety. At one point, it had me wondering, where are those frogs? Because I was kind of missing them a little bit. So that should tell you that there is decent variety in the game. As for how hard it is, because I'm sure that's crossed your mind, it is a Souls-like, so you're probably thinking and anticipating that it's going to be challenging. I would say that when it comes to the Souls-like genre, if you're looking at a spectrum of like the easiest to the hardest, I would say Tales of Iron is somewhere in the middle. The beginning of the game will have you a little misled. You'll think, oh, this isn't so bad. That's what I was thinking. Like, oh, this is kind of easy. But the end of the game it really turns up a notch, especially with multiple bosses and multiple enemies and things like that. And it can be a little rough. The good thing about it is that you have a lot of save points, a lot of checkpoints, a lot of opportunities to refill your health. So the quality of life parts of the game do help with that challenge. So what do you think? It's sounding pretty good, right? It's sounding like a great Souls-like. As with any game, you know, Tales of Iron is not perfect. A couple things I want to mention. The hitboxes on a couple of the bosses can be a bit funky. I noticed that when it came to certain bosses, I felt like I should not have been hit, and then I was, and that could be frustrating. So I took note of that. It's not every boss, thankfully, and it's not super consistent, but it's definitely noticeable when it happens. Also, when it comes to the DualSense, because I played this on PS5, in case you guys were wondering, the DualSense would make this kind of jolt feeling every time I would go to a different area. So when you're on the game, you're on the screen, right? And then you go to the left or right and it fades to black and then it fades back in. I would feel this movement in my controller every time. And it wasn't the most annoying thing, but it was very noticeable. And if that's something that bothers you, or it might annoy you, maybe you might want to play this game somewhere else, or maybe they will patch it. That's what I'm thinking. They might fix that somehow, but I don't think it's meant to happen. It's certainly not. So that's a thing. And lastly, I did have an audio glitch towards the last part of the game. The sound went out for the enemies, that's how it started, and then the rest of the sound just kind of followed with it. I had to restart my PS5 and then it was fine. So yeah, not perfect. There's some hiccups. Maybe some patches will come out and fix some of these things. But even if they don't, it's not game breaking. It's not like, oh my gosh, I lost my save or something crazy. Nothing like that. But yeah, if any of these things I mentioned would bother you, I would kind of be a little more hesitant. But my overall verdict is this, you guys. Let's get into it. Tales of Iron is a good, solid game. It's challenging, it's rewarding, it's fair, except for those little hitboxes here and there, you know, but you can push through and make it fair. But it is a challenge. It is a Souls-like. But it's also different at the same time and in its own way. So if that's what you're looking for, play this game. If you're not used to challenging games, I would watch more gameplay. I would see if it's for you. It being cute and with animals and all of that can be very deceiving because the gameplay, of course, is what's king, and that's ultimately what you're going to be feeling through this game, of course. So if you're afraid of challenging games and don't want to get frustrated and don't want to get upset, maybe hold off a little bit. But for somebody like me, somebody who likes the challenge, somebody who's into Souls-like, this game was right up my alley. People have told me, this is so you, Erica. This is an Erica game. And they're completely right. This is an Erica game, and it did not disappoint in that way. So take that as you will, and I hope you guys enjoyed my review. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Let me know if you're playing Tales of Iron, if you're planning to play it. Did this review help? Let me know, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Be sure and sub if you're new, and I will catch you guys in my next video, all right? Take care, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.